And I believe we're still waiting on, oh, there's Manager Crafton joining now. So I will hand it over to you, President Ziegler.
I will need co-host permissions, Amy.
President Ziegler, are you there?
I'm here, but I don't see my picture. That's
Nor do
weird.
we. There you are.
Okay, there I am. Okay, so Terry, you're getting co-host permissions,
Yep,
I believe.
I hope so.
Me too. So I'd like to call the workshop to order. It's 5:02. Do we need to take agenda or anything for the workshop?
I don't think so.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
I know we probably haven't addressed this, but it's something that we should probably bring up at the governance committee meeting regarding maybe the procedure for opening a meeting and doing agenda where we have a workshop. I actually think it would be appropriate to start with adopting an agenda if we're doing it consecutively. But that's something I think we can discuss as part of possible changes to the governance manual. But I think given as it is, we can at least proceed with the workshop items. And I believe there are just two. Is that correct?
That is correct. Shall I just dig in, President Ziegler, or?
Yes, please go ahead, Terry.
Good evening, everyone. So last year we made a concerted effort to present the budget earlier than years past, and that seemed to work better setting the budget. So we're doing the same again. I just want to again reiterate, this is a preliminary draft budget. We have done some significant refinements. I sent out another budget this afternoon where we've shifted some things around, and I'll talk through that and what we've done. I'll share the budget with you. This is also on the agenda tonight. We would like for the and Andrew Hollers or Chair Hollers of the CAC will be presenting thoughts that they had on communications between the board and the CAC. And from the staff's perspective, I see it as something for the board and the CAC to work out, and the staff will facilitate it in whatever way possible. So with that in mind, and people maybe wanting to eat between this and the regular meeting, I'll begin. Like I said, I'm going to go through the budget line by line, but I'm going to primarily focus on things that have been significantly changed from. So please interrupt me if you want me to back up and cover something. So with that, can everybody see the budget now? Spreadsheet open.
Yes.
Mr. President,
Yes, Manager
if I
Cook.
just a point of order, is there any way that you can make that slightly bigger or wider, or do you know what I can do on my end to make the spreadsheet a little bigger? That's a little better, thank you.
Yep.
It's just that I have space on each side of it, so, but anyhow, go ahead, that's much better.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're working off of what you
Sent this
today?
afternoon. What was sent this afternoon?
Okay.
Yep, the Excel spreadsheet that was sent this afternoon. So I won't bury the lead. We'll start with just the bottom line. The budget that was sent to you initially proposed a 21% increase in the levy over last year's levy, or this year's levy, excuse me. What we have done is our multi-year projects where we could shift the levy down the road. We have now, obviously, that means subsequent levies will have to absorb that cost, but I think we have a budget that is workable. So the proposed levy for this year is $3,854,426. the proposed budget is 7,163,814. And again, that's through carryover. Some of the revenues that aren't put in this yet, as most of you are aware, the grant period has opened up. We will be applying for grants for the Upper Riley Creek, for the Bluff Creek Reach 5 project, and we're going to see if there's funding available to help us with strategic planning on the 10-year plan as it pertains to ecosystem services, soil health, climate resiliency. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. That was it for revenues that we put in, again, because we didn't know what they would be. As we get further into the year, I think we'll have a better understanding of what we might have for permit revenues, plug those in for what we anticipate for next year. Obviously, this last year, we had a fairly substantial bust between revenues that were taken in versus the expenditures that went out on our permit reviews. So on this column C is the 2022 budget. Column L, proposed levy. Column M, proposed budget. So we'll start with the audit. We added 2,500 to it, just inflationary reasons and additional meetings, things of that nature, so that we have adequate budget for them to do what they want. Accounting was the same thing. Advisory committee, well, we haven't spent any money on them, so moving that forward, but hopefully things will start opening up. I know that I've had conversations with Chair Allers and at least one board member about perhaps doing a field trip this fall and stopping and ending at one of our area parks and having picnics. So that's where those expenditures would go to. Insurance and bonds, this number will change. We just renewed with the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust. They have sent me one of the two quotes. I'll get the second quote hopefully next week. So the next time we meet, this number should accurately reflect what it is. So we just went with the straight line projection right now. One of the things that we did change, the casualty or the property insurance seemed to not reflect all the additional equipment that has been purchased by the district. So that we increased coverage about 50% in value of all the laptops, iPads, all of our ISCO units, projector, et cetera, et cetera. So I expect an increase on that front alone. Engineering services is a straight line increase. And kind of circling back without the permit position for a while. Engineering has picked up a lot of that slack. Legal services, that's something we're going to have to look at as well. If you look at in April, at the end of April, we were at 42% of that budget already. Mr. Smith was unable to be here for the workshop. He will be here for the regular meeting. So I will meet with Mr. Smith and try and get a better idea of what that figure will be, or what we can do to keep it within that initial budget, which would be my preferred option. Manager per diem, there's a fairly significant increase on this, and that's because we had discussed doing 2 meetings a month. And even if we don't do 2 meetings a month, we seem to have been coming close to 2 meetings a month already. So that's the increase there. Dues publication remain the same. Office costs increased, and on this one, let's see. The increase in office costs is really related to primarily looking at moving to that hybrid environment. So it's getting office furniture to accommodate a hybridized environment. We've looked at, I've got one contractor thus far has submitted. I'm hoping to get a couple more. So it'd be updating the office furniture. It would be the whatever we need for hybrid electronics. And this quote is just going off of what 9 Mile and Minnehaha Creek has seen. We'll get our own and better reflect it, but I see this as the top, and Staff Baca and I have been looking at some other potential technologies that are out there that are considerably cheaper. It's just a matter of if we can still have that interface with the public back into, we know we can get the meeting projected out to everybody, but it's allowing them to interact with us that we're trying to work through. And then the other changes is we have several ballasts that are out in the lighting in our office. Right now, the way the lighting is set, it's not very conducive to darkening the correct parts of the room so people could see the projection. We thought if we're doing it, if we're replacing any of it, and we need to get an electrician in there to make the hybrid environment work, we might as well upgrade to LED lighting and get it switched over so that it works right. That was $5,600. So those were the big ticket items that really resulted in that increase in office costs. Permit review and inspection. What we're noticing, Engineer Soviak and I, there's just a lot of government projects. And it's something that we're hoping we can offset some of this as we go through the regulatory review program, perhaps streamlining the reports in some manner, or coming up with a way to look at a more regional approach when working with the cities, just something that would allow us to offset it. But that's the increase there. Permit grant database. The permit database is done. Now we're working on the grant database. So this would include the license that's actually, it's licensed to use the software, and then any reports we want them developed for us, and finalizing the grants database. Professional services, that's gone up. Couple reasons. One, we had some unforeseen expenses this year in professional services. But the second part of it is, well, I got to kind of take the blame for it. Given the condition of my hire, I put some budget in there to meet that requirement of professional services. Recording services is the same thing. We're going to need recording services for an extra meeting a month, hence that increase there. So these would be the things if we decide not to do an extra meeting a month, where we could perhaps realize some savings. Staff costs, the thing to notice about staff costs, one, it's considerably less. That's because we're not planning on adding my old position back in. We'll work with the staff that we have. We are looking at having our staff be put into the position that they are currently actually doing, and compensating for them for that. The other thing to note in here is in years prior, part of the staff costs had been included in different budgets. We took it all out of the other budgets. Staff cost and benefits is included strictly in this line item. It is not anywhere else within it. So no hidden monies anywhere. The other change we made was to take, I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Dorothy? You're on mute. You're on mute, Dorothy.
Terry, did you include anything for the new like 401k plan, kind of that match at all when you were doing any of the benefits costs? No,
there is nothing included for a match of a 401k.
Okay, we'll have to talk about that at the personnel committee meeting.
Okay. And then the other one is fleet management. We moved fleet management into the administration. Prior, it had kind of been in data collection. Again, I just thought it made more sense since we're using it for E&O, we're using it for the grant program, we're using it for permits inspection, and we're using it for data collection. There's no point in not just having it be its own separate item. So this is just kind of looking at a ball. Obviously, fuel costs are going to be pretty hard to figure out, to nail down. We get what we think is a good estimate, and then what we've been spending basically on repairs and general maintenance every year. This line 35, is another significant change from what you had prior, what I had submitted to you prior. The change is $50,000 was added to this. Let me make this bigger for you. So we had initially talked about $30,000 for plan update, and then the rule revision. But as we started thinking about it, thinking about some of the initiatives that we've heard from the managers, particularly soil health, ecosystem services, climate resiliency, we added an extra $50,000 into this line item so we could start phase one and do some strategic planning. What I would ultimately like to come out of this with are objectives, goals, methods to achieve that the board of managers agrees that it is the approach that we should take. So that's the change there from the last budget. You had an additional 50,000 was put into that line item. Cost share, we added 20,000 for just miscellaneous. We're going to come pretty close to using it all this year. I don't know if staff Forbes is just doing an exceptional job of getting the word out, or we've just had more people, but it's been going well. Data collection and monitoring was also increased. The reason for the increase was to purchase more ISCO units or more sampling units so that we could start to really quantify the benefits of the best management practices that we were putting in. We don't, as it is, we don't have enough equipment to monitor all the sites, so additional funds were put in to get additional monitoring equipment. Community resilience, this is phase two of the district-wide model. Well, most of the district-wide model, with the exception of Chanhassen, should be completed this year. This will be going into looking at mitigative measures based on the flood risks that have been identified by that, working with our partner communities to implement projects. And I would also see this as being part of that 10-year plan, strategic plan up that I talked about, because I think all of this, you know, I think the purpose of that plan will be to quit siloing everything and really look at it in a more holistic approach. So I see this, the wetland assessment program, and then any new soil health initiatives, identification of sensitive areas, decision of whether or not we want to start looking at purchasing conservation easements or things of that nature. So, so that's that portion of it. You know, we bumped it up just a bit, about 10%. Reason being, we're hoping we're going to be getting back into schools. Staff man has already worked her way into a few schools, so we're having success there. Flat restoration U of M, this is Newman's work that was approved back in May of this year. Repair and maintenance fund. So right now we've increased the budget. This is a discussion I think we need to have perhaps in its own work session, but what we're running into, and some of the managers have already recognized this, are some of the municipalities are lacking either the technical expertise or the staffing to maintain some of the more cutting edge or non-traditional best management practices. So one of the things that Engineer Soviak and I have been discussing is, do we want to have money set aside specifically to help troubleshoot those items, or to provide training to city staff, or if necessary, provide them the equipment that they needed to do that. And that's something I would like to have discussion with the managers. The other thing we've been using this for are our own BMPs that we put in. So for instance, the rec area berm, this money was transferred over to that. So it would go into those. Wetland management, this is the wetland assessment program. Staff Dickhausen has been really the last 2 years doing it on its own, and doing a fantastic job of it. He's been doing both the holistic quality indices as well as the Minnesota rapid assessment methodology. He has finished up with the bulk of the watershed. He has Minnetonka really left to do. If things go well and the season holds, he should be able to finish that up this year and then go back to the beginning, do a little QA/QC on some of the other min-RAMs, as well as doing the floristic quality indices. We're working with Joe Bischoff from BAR on developing the straw man for this assessment and how it would work. And then we will move into phase 2 with this funding of actually implementing that assessment throughout the district, identifying high priority wetlands, wetlands that are well suited for restoration, wetlands that don't exist that should exist, and perhaps we can recreate them, things of that nature. So that's what that funding is for. Groundwater conservation, the grant is done this year. That was not, well, that we had some consternation over, we'll say. So it's actually showing a negative. It's the money that's left over in that program. We're not going to be levying everything else for that. But it is something that we will, as a staff, look at coming forward to the board with ideas about how we might be able to implement a groundwater conservation grant program, if it is something indeed that we want to even get involved in. So no levy is proposed for that. Lake vegetation implementation. This is our lake vegetation implementation. Now, this is something else we can spread out over 4 or 5 years. We have increased this. We basically doubled this. The reason for that is we have budgeted to do lake vegetation management plans for, I'm going to make sure I get the right lakes, for Lotus, Mitchell. Let me make that larger for you again. Why do we have, Scott, I thought oh, there we are. Wait, where did they go, Scott?
Scroll down.
Here we go. Susan, Lucy, Rice Marsh, Riley, and Starry. So we could space those out, do 1 a year, do 2 a year. So there is a way to move that levy around if we want to. So those are some funding, 60 to 80,000 that we could shift around to future years, should the manager so desire. Opportunity projects, we're not proposing to levy anything, but we are going to continue to look for opportunity projects. Stormwater pond project is done. Chloride initiatives are done. Before I move into the individual creek watersheds, anybody have any questions, comments, concerns on the district-wide programs?
Mr. President.
Manager Cook.
Well, I have a number of questions and comments, throughout, but maybe at this point, given the situation that we may have some inflation for, we don't know how long and what that impact would be. I am a believer that we should not be adding to these projects. Because simply, I think that some of these projects, unless you explain to me otherwise, are going to end up being much more costly than what we're probably estimating. I couldn't figure out exactly how, if at all, the Minneapolis construction index was, whether it was factored in or not. I would actually like to see it more explicitly factored in. But you know, the factors that I saw were only through May of 2022. And, you know, we noticed that we had a significant increase here just in June. I have no idea where it's going to go. It could end up going down just as quickly. But I am concerned about increasing any project, any line item greater than what we had anticipated, because I think everything's going to get more expensive, you know, and significantly more expensive when we go to bid them. I hope I'm wrong, but then we'll have plenty of money and we can do things. So I'm very concerned about trying to increase it. I'm in, you know, fully in favor of soil health and all that, but you know, and maybe people think $50,000 is not much, but you know, in light of the economic circumstances we're in, I'm not sure this is the best year to spend that money, especially considering, you know, what you have here. We're doing a 5.9%. I think that's going to be a little bit of sticker shock for a lot of our residents. You know, on that basis, we have to take that into account. The one last comment I have a bunch of individual comments, and I can send them to you, or we can address it at the next meeting, but I'm not sure it's appropriate to put a negative number in a proposed levy. Generally, that would just be a zero, because I think it distorts totals. But, you know, I mean, not a big deal, but, you know, you add 50 there and another 50, and pretty soon you got 100, and pretty soon you can do more work on the projects that you've, you know, reduced, which you're going to talk about. So those are my general comments, you know, so far.
Yeah, that was our plan, to take that 49,000, and I think there's another one, and just move them into another project to reduce that cost. But yeah, for the illustration of this, we just left it at that, but you're right. So, okay.
Oh, yeah, excuse me. And I'm sorry, I know you're gonna, you know, get to the Purgatory Creek where you've got partner funds, but you know, my view is if you're going to list a partner funding in the lower items, you should be including that same amount in partner funds in revenues. And, you know, to keep apples and oranges, it may turn out we don't get any of the money, but then it drops out both places.
That's why we didn't put it in, because we don't expect to get that money until 24 at the earliest.
Then I think we shouldn't be including it in, you know, on the line for Purgatory Creek. We shouldn't include that. It should be either both entries, you know, the dual entry system of accounting, both places or no places. So that's my comment there. And then you can go on then on that.
President Ziegler, I do have one other comment. And Terry, that's that when you propose an increase like this, 5.9%, it's always really helpful to me if you're able to tell me what the increase in property taxes is for the average household in our district. You know, is this like $5 or is this like $50 a year? You know what I mean? So that just is always really helpful, just so that we have more of a real foundation of what it is when you're asking for this kind of an increase. That's all I have.
Okay.
Okay, Terry, one comment I have is, you know, we held it last year to near zero or no increase. Is that correct?
I think it would end up being 1.7.
1.7. Okay. And we know that the property taxes that the cities collected did go up more than that.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so Bluff Creek, this shouldn't take too long. Bluff Creek tributary, that's the west branch. This will be finishing up. We need an extra $3,000. This is one of those where, as manager pointed out, the $48,000 up above might be able to go there, reduce that. wetland at Pioneer Creek, we've already levied what we needed for that. It will be completed this year. And then the 5 years of maintenance thereafter. And then if we decide to do any education outreach or create something, that would be a separate project we would do. And then there is the Bluff Creek project. This is the one that extends from the headwaters of Bluff Creek on the west side of Gallopin Boulevard down to Troy Highway 5. So this is one that in the initial budget that was presented to you, we had all of it levied here. This budget shows us spreading that levy out over several years. That's Bluff Creek. Lake Riley, we do need to do an alum treatment on it, so we are levying for that one. Rice Marsh in Lake, this is one that we may be able to move down a year, push it back into 24. So there's some potential savings to reduce that levy. Rice Park, this is the Rice Marsh Lake Park project with the Krakens, the rain gardens. Again, this is just the finishing up the restoration of the property. And then the big ticket item is Upper Riley Creek. This is that stretch from Highway 5, basically Paisley Park down to Lake Susan. So those are the ones that we are levying for. Middle Riley Creek is finishing up. Talking about a little change order that that Bear Path has requested at tonight's regular meeting. St. Hubert water quality still will be the St. Hubert is making 3 installments of $15,000, so that's where that part of fund comes from. So yes, we'll put that, move that up into. Oh, I think we've accounted for that one, but we haven't accounted for this. All right, so that is the Riley Creek. Go through Purgatory Creek here quick and hopefully leave enough time for some questions and CAC discussions. So the reason we keep seeing the rec area and the berm show up year after year is honestly, the current existing condition serves the district's purposes. However, it does not serve the city's purposes in that it is a trail system through there. And there is some subsidence and or erosion that is occurring on that berm, which has led to the trail no longer being there. So it's just not a high priority for the district. The city, it is a higher priority for. I have said to them that we don't necessarily want to take on management of the project, contract administration, construction administration. We'd be far more amenable to partnering financially and having them do that. There's been a little bit of an impasse on that. So it's going to stay there until we can resolve that, who's actually responsible for that project. Lotus Lake in-lake phosphorus control. Again, we're programming for this year, or excuse me, for next year to do that. Silver Lake, this is to, so, and we'll talk about Silver Lake tonight at the regular meeting. We went out for quotes to complete the work that Molno did not do. So this is to finish up the project and long-term maintenance in Silver Lake. We do have the funding left over from the liquidated damages to cover this, but we went out for quotes anyway, for obvious reasons. So that's Scenic Heights is done. Duck Lake Road Partnership. I think we all know what this is. This is the 5-year partnership with Eden Prairie on the bridge. Lotus Lake, again, we talked about it last fall about trying to find a way to more efficiently do projects rather than doing each individual project, have each individual contract administration, each individual construction administration. each individual cooperative agreement, etc. Can we roll them into one larger project if they're geographically aligned with one another? And that's what we did here. This was also another project that in the prior budget that was submitted was all levied in this year or in the next year. In this instance, we spread it out to reduce the levy for this year. Those are the projects, capital projects and administration, our proposed budget. Engineer Soviak, Staff Baca, and I will look at the partner fund question, as well as zeroing out those columns. We will also look at, are there ways to tighten it up a little bit more, get that levy amount down just a little bit further, and the tax load on our residents and what that would mean.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
if I might, I have a number of things that I'd like to cover here, and I'll try to do it quickly. First of all, commend staff for putting this together and having it to us in July and not having to be presented with it in September. So thank you very much for doing that. I assume that the CAC has not seen this yet.
That is correct. That's part of the reason I chose tonight to have the joint meeting with the CAC, although not many of them are here, because I had hoped that they would get it presented to them at this time as well.
Well, could you, on that note, then, could you make sure that this goes to the CAC and that they have a link to the video and the audio for this presentation so that they can look at it, because I'm interested, obviously, in their feedback. Other item that I have here, for me to really assess this and moving money around, I would put it this way. I think I need to see a comprehensive schedule going over the next several years. I realize you have some of that on individual projects, but I think we need to consolidate that into one so we have a better handle on what we're looking for each year over the next, 5 years or remainder of the plan. And also to make sure, I want to make sure, see where we are today vis-a-vis the plan that we have in place and where the current plan predicts or shows that we're going to go. Obviously, we can change it, but I think it's hard to agree to spread money out over years without a good idea about the impact we'll have on subsequent years. So I would appreciate seeing that type of a comparison. The other thing I'd like to see is that, and I provided a template yesterday, but I need to see more detail on the compensation level, particularly because I want to make sure that I'm looking at what kind of increases we're scheduling, because I want to make sure that staff gets treated fairly on that basis, but I can't do that without some level of detail. And as I said before, I've provided a sample schedule that certainly would help me in making that analysis. I think getting that sample included the ability to put in percentage increases throughout and would have corresponding impacts to all the various contributions. And maybe while you're at it, we could add a variable for matching on the 401k plan. So we could vary that, make it so it sets up. So I would very much like to see that. I need to have, more detail on that. I have two final comments here. Are we comfortable? How comfortable are we with the carryovers, et cetera, since when we dealt with the 2021, we didn't make adjustments. We didn't make post-year-end adjustments to all the counts. And to me, then we start out with something that's not exactly accurate. So I'd ask that you go back and test the guesses to make sure that where we're starting from, adequately or properly reflects where we actually ended up, given that for whatever reason this year, managers decided not to true up the budget as we've done in prior years. And then my last comment is kind of a repeat of what I said before. My concern about the impact of inflation and why I'm concerned about doing too much or scheduling too much this year, because, or not this year, but next year, because we don't know where prices, I don't think we know where prices are going to go. And we can always start to spend more money, but I don't like to look at committing spending more money. And I would, if we need the money to get some projects done, like, the Lotus Lake projects, more at one time for the efficiencies. I think there was some $400,000 projected savings by getting these projects done. I'll be honest with you, I'd sooner rob Peter and pay Paul. And if we need to take for a year some funds out of whether it be opportunity or other areas, I think I would like to apply that in order to capture those efficiencies, because I guess I look at it as really would be an opportunity. It's an opportunity to get everything done and save $400,000, which would pay for opportunity for a year or for 2 years. You see what I'm saying? So I would like you to look at, does it make sense to move some dollars around so that we can garner that $400-some thousand efficiency? Maybe you can already do it, but I think the bottom line is really need to have show a comprehensive, putting all the projects in that multi-year format that we have, but carry it out all the way for 5 years till the end of the plan. So we can really tell, whoops, we really can't afford to delay this, or we can't do these because we'll have it such an enormous number in 2024 that, nothing will get done or only the minimum. So that finishes my comments. Thank you.
Just in one response to that, something to consider. I think things such as planning efforts will be fairly immune to the inflationary pressures. It's the actual construction of projects where we're really going to experience that at fuel costs, mobilization costs. Again, there is the schedule that we put forward for doing these projects. If the board chooses to delay a project a year, that's not an issue. That's not the end all be all. I mean, we can certainly say, let's wait and see what happens with this next cycle and push those projects back 1 year. Things such as the alum treatment and vegetation treatment, I think we need to stay on top of that for obvious reasons. Planning, I think we can continue to do at that cost. But yeah, I think you have some legitimate concerns, Manager Cook, and there are some other ways around it to maybe wait and see what happens with the bidding cycle, the bidding environment, rather, go from there.
Thank you.
Manager Crafton, I haven't heard from you. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not quite on the same page as Manager Cook on some of these things. We've got some opportunities that I think it's really important for us to pursue. We've been working on the H&H model in order to help our cities predict flooding, but that information doesn't help them if they can't mitigate. So that's where taking a good look at soil or ecosystem services, so that when we're helping with mitigation, we're doing it in a fashion that's more sustainable. So one of the things I'm going to be asking tonight is to put on the agenda is that see if there's a consensus amongst the managers to direct staff to develop a framework, at least with some goals and objectives, and a work plan that could go with that, and if possible, a draft amendment in case we want to do some changes to the plan. But I think some of that is inherent in doing projects in a much more sustainable way and capturing some of those metrics. And I think it's really cutting edge. There's nobody else really doing it. We've got a state climate action plan. We've got a Hennepin County action plan, climate action plan. Some of our three-step cities are wanting to do more with their natural resources. So I think there are a lot of things, opportunities to leverage, and I would I would hate to see us miss that when those are so critical with climate change and collapsing ecosystems and water quality issues. What we've been learning from soil health is it's all part of one system. So we need to be strategic in how we look at it. So at this point, I'm fine with the discussion and where it's gone. But that's why I think asking for some direction in terms of how we might want to be incorporating ecosystem services into what we're doing and the metrics we're collecting will be important.
President Ziegler, I have a couple of other questions. Terry, what you have money in there for the wetland project where we purchased those pieces of property, and I like how much is actually going?
So the wetland management program,
Is that where it is? I
That's
was trying to
really
figure out
for the
where it went.
no, that's for the assessment of the wetlands district-wide and then
Right,
identification of future restoration projects. The Pioneer Wetland Project is in the Bluff Creek, well, let me find it, in the Bluff Creek. And so that's this one that has been funded.
Okay.
Through, we've levied fully for that project. Now, there might be subsequent things we want to do with it. You know, there'd be a boardwalk or some educational features or things of that nature. But yeah, that has been done. Right now, the other wetland restoration identified would be part of that Reach 5 project for Bluff Creek at the headwaters. This wouldn't be as intense of a restoration. We'd be really looking at reconnecting the floodplain and the wetland, increasing bounce and duration and reducing rates out of there, hopefully flooding out the reed canary grass and getting something a little better. So right now those only two identified. Hopefully, not hopefully, once we have completed phase 2 of the wetland assessment, we'll start identifying more and more opportunities, and we'll have to levy for those in those years.
Okay, and you have enough money in here to be able to maybe get yourself a little bit better IT help on a more consistent basis?
That's actually something I wanted to discuss with the managers at some point. I'm not overall thrilled with Imagine IT. I would like to see what we can do, but I thought first I might give them a chance to come in and talk to the managers. But yeah, I think with our professional services increase in budget, we could probably find a way to do it. In fact, again, because that was such a hard one to go apples to apples with the different IT people, you know, I don't know that another one would cost any more money. They would just be different services. So I think if we, and if I remember correctly, the RFP, they're actually done at the end of this year because the way that how it went late into our cycle. So maybe we could draft a more specific RFP saying, here are the 8 or 9 services we want you to provide, period. And then just what are the costs for those? So,
Okay.
yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, just my input is I agree with what the other managers have said, but I also agree with the soil health initiative.
Yeah.
I don't think that's something we can let slide. Other projects that have been in the 10-year plan, it doesn't mean they're better. We need to find the money for that particular program so that we get on a better track towards alleviating climate change issues in a more environmentally friendly manner. So I think that's an important one. Otherwise, if we're done with this, the CAC.
Mr.
I think
President.
Manager Cook has one thing he would like to add.
Okay,
So, well, I based on what people have said, I don't know that I necessarily agree with all the fine points here. Then we need to have a workshop sooner rather than later and talk about what are we going to do this year going forward. What my concern is that over the past couple of years, we have been siloing our decisions and not appropriately taking into account the impact in future years. So I would like to not just, you know, a couple of sentences here in a meeting, but, you know, if we're going to do something like this, we need some meaty meetings, if that makes sense, you know, and really talk about it. So I understand what Manager Crafton is talking about, you know, and what they're proposing to do. And we can have a discussion about, you know, how we value, you know, various projects, how we get bang for the buck, you know, et cetera. And, you know, there was a reason we came up with the, you know, items we have in the 10-year plan the way it is. So my point is that I hope you'd look at scheduling some workshops to have some discussions around these issues before we, you know, silo each year and we lose track of, you know, where the vision was. Not that we can't change it, but I think we need to know where we came from, where we're going before we change it. Thank you.
President Ziegler.
Manager Crafton.
So one of the things that our administrator just said was that the planning isn't as expensive, and we've got expertise. I mean, Joe Bischoff is a tremendous asset at BAR. The work that staff Dick Housen's been doing with wetlands, we've got the expertise. I think that my request is just that they put together a framework and you know, and a work plan, and kind of come together on what the implications could be. So, I mean, because it needs to be a holistic approach across what we're doing in a lot of different places. So I don't see that as being a real costly thing, but we need to be informed. But I don't think that a lot of workshops and just are talking. I think we need to pull on the resources of the people that are already part of our team in terms of staff and consultants with the expertise.
Well, Mr. President, I don't want to belabor this any further, but I think a workshop and who attends is a secondary question. But, you know, I, for one, not going to vote for one-offs here without understanding what we're talking about before we agree to go spend money. So that's where I'm from. I think we need to move on to.
Yeah, I have one other comment, President Ziegler, and that is, you know, I'm in the landscaping industry, and what we're seeing in the industry is that cost runs this year have been 15 to 30% more than what was budgeted. And it's just because everything, it's plants, it's fuel, it's getting soil particles to it's labor costs, it's everything, 15 to 30% more.
Thank you.
Sure.
So are we ready then to move on and let the CAC?
I am, Mr. President.
Okay. Terry?
President Ziegler, managers.
So who is our CAC representative?
So we have Chairman Allers is here tonight.
Okay.
He is going to be presenting a short presentation. Some of the ideas that the CAC has kicked about. There should be a flow chart or communication flow chart that the manager should be familiar with, although it has been one, made prettier, and two, modified to incorporate the thoughts. So with that, I will turn it over to Staff Forbes and Chairman Allers.
Andrew Allers muted.
You're on mute.
There we go. Is that better?
Much better.
Thank you. So the minutes that are going to be presented tonight to the board managers at your meeting, all that you should have received in your packet also indicate the discussions that we had at our last CAC meeting regarding communication processes. And we were looking to see, we had some feedback from some of the members on the potential for increased communication or better communication so that we can better do our jobs in assisting you in performing your duties as managers. My understanding being first time chair of this, and as well the CAC, as well as being my first term on the CAC, I'm learning a lot about the communication, a lot about the onboarding process, and those are the types of things that we were looking at trying to present to you as things that we wanted to make sure we could button down and produce a good product for you. My understanding was that Manager Peterson actually started this process back when she was the chair of the CAC. And that was the groundwork that had been started. We wanted to make sure that we took that framework and built on it. So this is the new and improved process that we were working on from that initial document. So Liz, do you want to share the screen? I don't see it. There we go. So we can move on to the concerns that were presented. So we had a meeting with the process to, and some of the things that were brought up in the meeting were a discussion about a process to dismiss a CAC member, which is undefined. We don't have this problem right now. My understanding is that it had occurred in the past, that there was some indication that they were unhappy with, or members had been unhappy with other members in process matters, or whether or not it was participation in the program. And so we wanted to clarify whether or not, I don't believe with the managers having the authority to appoint, that you appoint, that our process would be then that we would let you know that there's a problem. Our bylaws indicate that if a person misses several meetings, 2 meetings a year, we're allowed to go ahead and do that. I understand that we have the control of that process, but we wanted to make sure that we're working inside your defined authority. So since you appoint, our understanding is that we would then refer that individual to you, indicate the problems that we're having, and then the board would take appropriate action to either terminate or instruct us to continue to work with that individual.
So just a quick comment. I did talk to Lewis Smith, and that's correct. So you would recommend, and then we would make a decision.
Great, thank you. And that's much appreciated. And then if there's any feedback that the managers wanted to give us as far as the types of things, we are going to try to make sure that it is not discriminatory, obviously, or any of those other things. But we want to make sure that it's based on grounds where a person just isn't producing or isn't participating. If there are any other factors that you would want considered, then let us know. We can put those into the process. The potential solutions were, again, to outlaw the approach in the CAC bylaws. We do have, there's no defined valid reason for dismissal, but that's something that we can work on in changing our bylaws to make sure that they're more specific.
Chairman Allers, you might want to consider using something like we have in the governance manual that talks about the type of behavior and which behaviors are acceptable and what might not be acceptable, and kind of come up with some variants of that just for you, for your committee.
Right. We do have the code of conduct in the bylaws.
Right.
So we can use those as a framework to move from. So that's a good
Okay,
idea.
good.
If we go to the next slide. The timing and flow of information and topics is always a concern, because we want to make sure that we're receiving the information in a timely fashion so that we can present information or give you the appropriate feedback in a timely fashion so that you can act on it. And we're not putting the cart before the horse when we're doing information. One of the things was the timing of our minutes based upon the meetings, and when you receive those was discussed. So we're looking to make sure that we understand that there's a delay in the final approved minutes and their dissemination from the Board of Managers meeting. So we don't see the actual final product. But because we have a member there, we do have and receive a report on what happened at the meeting. As tonight I'll be sitting in, and then I'll make my presentation to the next CAC meeting. So that we believe assists in providing that information. But we would like to be informed as early as possible about projects to allow that feedback, especially with the difference between the district-led projects and the permit applications for outside projects, which of course are both, as far as we're concerned. I think the district-led projects or the capital improvements projects are things that we can get earlier information on. And the permit applications obviously are, you never know when someone's going to walk through the door and ask for a permit. So we're looking to see if there's any way to clarify how you would like to treat those and whether or not we would split the information and receive information earlier so that we could potentially give you some feedback. Our potential.
Okay, I had a comment.
Manager Crafton, yes.
Yeah, so the permits can be pretty sensitive in that, well, particularly in when engineer Skobiak is working on them, there's kind of a facilitation and a trying to get them into compliance with our rules. And it takes a lot of back and forth negotiation. So it's not like the application comes in and it's a static deal. There's a lot of dynamic negotiations, kind of, so to speak, going on to try and move them forward. So I think that sometimes that's why it seems like it takes longer, or things aren't complete, or the engineer gives them feedback and then he's got to wait for them to come back and respond and adjust what they've submitted. So just so we're all aware that it is a dynamic process. It's not just as clear cut as it seems sometimes. But yes, the more we can see those things ahead of time, then we can comment too and hopefully make the process better.
So thank you. Some of the suggestions that we had, the potential solutions, were to encourage the CAC members to be part of an email blast. So when things did get provided, that we would get a notification of that as they're added to the website, or if there's action taken on something, we could receive the information at that time that we could follow up on. And we do understand, certainly with especially with the engineering aspects of these things, that the project might be complete for purposes of presenting to the Board of Managers, but not necessarily complete for the Board of Managers to be able to make a decision. So, and I understand that it wouldn't be the first time that the engineers are asking for more information to provide to you, so to assist you in that as well.
Chairman Allers, I have one other comment too, and that is when I was on the CAC, the interest in knowing the full details of everything really varies depending on the CAC. Some members of the CAC are going to say, there's no way I'm going to spend 5 hours a month of my time reading through all this permitting stuff. You know, so really what I tried to do was to find some way of some summation with, here's what this thing is about, and if you want more details, go to here. Because it's a big time commitment on behalf of the volunteers on your committee to really expect them to know everything about all these permits that come through. Providing them with the access to the information is wonderful, but I'm not certain all of them really want to know everything. So I think that's kind of up to you to decide how you want to try to disseminate the information to everybody there. And make it so that it's palatable to those that might not want everything.
We used to call
Another
those
way
cliff
to-
notes.
Yeah, another way to approach that is to look at the rules. You know, we're going to be reviewing the rules and looking at some of the permits again tonight. You know, they meet the rules, but I'm not particularly happy with them. And if the CAC wants to provide input for adjusting the rules to help, all the projects, not just the ones that, get the high visibility or big dollar ones that everybody's concerned with, but the rules apply to all of the projects. And if we tweak the rules to make them a little more environmentally friendly, and maybe that means that some of the property that's being developed can't have, 80% hard surfaces. That's one way to kind of easily touch and affect all of the permits.
Good point.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
well, I'd just like to remind everybody, we should be asking for the floor before speaking ad hoc. And then secondly, when I have the floor here, I think it's up to the CAC's job is to comment. And as you said, I mean, you can, with permits, it's going to be commenting after the fact. And if you think, and I agree with President Ziegler, absolutely, commenting on possible rule changes to avoid maybe certain outcomes that don't seem to fit with our philosophy. That's maybe a good way to go about it. But, as far as information is, there's, today everybody can get a packet at the same time we do. Today, and I think into the future, everybody can tune into these meetings. And I would highly recommend that members tune into this meeting, these meetings, rather than rely on somebody spending time summarizing things. I think it's always best to get a good flavor of actually what's going on and what's being discussed. But how you operate is your business, and I guess the only thing we can do is appoint people and remove people. That's basically where we're at.
Thank you. I'm just thinking if to take into consideration as well, if the Board of Managers, there's obviously a varying degree of interest in projects and in the different things that the CAC is looking at, whether the Board of Managers wants to consider that as something that they would want to require of future CAC members during the year, that they attend so many meetings. So it's not just one person, but there'll be multiple people online throughout the year. Maybe not necessarily every meeting, but that they would be required to attend 3 or 4. And then that would also give us a basis of, if that attendance is not there or not met, that would give us all an indication that maybe the interest isn't there and that there should be a new appointment.
Okay, Mr. President?
Manager Cook?
I'm going to add one thing, because you mentioned Mr. Aller about the minutes, and I'm going to be bringing this up at our governance committee meeting, but and also tonight. We had a process, at least I think we still did it in 2021, that there was the agreement that the minutes would be in draft form and disseminated 1 week from the date of the meeting, so that everybody could look at them. The second part of that was that everybody was supposed to look at them and provide their comments in advance, either to staff or the secretary, so that we literally have a markup that would be sent in the board packet, so we wouldn't be spending quite so much time wondering about whether it was a he, she, they, or it was FOUR instead of FOR, etc. And I, for one, I'd like to, we're going to discuss that at the governance committee meeting, as about trying to bring that back, because that sounds like that might be a solution for your committee as well.
Good. So there's a few more slides we need to go through, and I would like actually to have dinner before the
We'll go
next
through
meeting.
this so you can have a snack.
Thank you.
We won't call it dinner. So there was discussion of the fact that the turnover for the last few chair individuals, there's really no defined leadership transition process in our bylaws, and we were wondering whether there would be a standard that the Board of Managers would like to have as far as the number of years or number of terms that a person is on the CAC before they engage. It's one of those things, or at the very minimum that we have a transition process, a uploading process, where onboarding process where individuals know exactly what they're supposed to do in a step-by-step fashion.
Oh, Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
just quickly, Mr. Aller, you might want to think about what the United States Congress does, and they rotate chairs of sessions. Okay, so the vice president, president of the Senate, doesn't do all the meetings, nor does Nancy Pelosi do all the meetings. They rotate it so everybody has some experience of doing various things. I just throw that out because that's kind of in the news lately, having those meetings. Thank you.
President
Okay.
Ziegler and Chair Aller, the other thing that I would always encourage everyone to do who's on the CEC is go to the MOD training session in December. Absolutely necessary. Maybe we need to adjust when we appoint new members so that it's prior to the MOD thing, so people can go to MOD, get a little training, and then start, rather than have people on these terms where they start in January or February and now they have to wait 10, 11 months before they can get there.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
the other thing I would point out is that MOD has a watershed handbook, and the League of Cities has a handbook. And I would highly recommend that anybody appointed, the first thing they do is read the MOD Watershed District Handbook, and then secondarily read the League of Cities Handbook, because that covers a lot of the laws and nuances that affect us. So I just throw those out as suggestions for a training session. And I agree that attending the sessions that MOD have is a great idea. But even then, based on my experience, having been in them, reading the materials ahead of time is perhaps a better practice in addition. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. And I think that's what the importance is of getting these packets out to the CAC as well as to the Board of Managers, that we have the ability to read at our leisure instead of trying to open a packet after the vote's been taken, so to speak. So those are the potential solutions that we had there, to develop a checklist of items to cover for the new leadership, to clearly define those expectations with the duties and extra meetings, and to set annual meeting event calendar based on the Board of Managers meeting calendar. So again, once we have that calendar in place from the Board of Managers, then we can set ours right away, and we can follow along with the items that are presented and are needed to be handled by and matters of statute that are going to be brought before the Board of Managers.
One other item, President Ziegler and Chairman Aller, and that is the meeting between the Board of Manager President and the CAC Chair. So when I was lucky enough to be able to do that with President Forster, he would come after the organizational meeting had been put together for the Board of Managers meeting and say, here's what we're going to talk about at the next Board of Manager meeting. And here's maybe some items that are perhaps a little questionable or brand new and you might want to know about. That was incredibly helpful. So if we could reestablish that at the right point, I think that would be really good for the CAC. They're going to know what's going on a bit more.
President Ziegler?
Staff, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so Manager Pedersen, yeah, we've talked about that. One of the things that I almost don't wonder to be cognizant of President Ziegler's time would be to just invite the chair to the agenda setting.
Great idea.
Yeah, that seems like that should be workable.
Another less workable item, I think, would be we always invite a Board of Managers and a member of the Board of Managers to participate in the CAC as an individual, certainly not as a speaker for the board at that time, but there might be the opportunity then to either modify that or not, but again, we don't want to walk into violations of the working process of the Board of Managers or the CAC in making any presentation at the meeting. But while I'm saying that, I do also want to thank each and every manager for taking the time to do that and to participate and to come and be present, because it does show that our time is being valued by the Board of Managers. And I think that goes a long way into keeping the spirits and the interest up, the passion up of the individual CAC members. So we thank you for that.
Chairman Allers, I'm not sure whether or not anybody's ever said this to you all, but I kind of consider the CAC as our hands and our fingers out into the community. I mean, that's how I view that. And you have such an impact on how the community sees us. Whatever you can do to inspire people to be out there and get the word out is the world's best thing. You know, the more people, more cheerleaders we have working all together, the better off we'll be seen in the community.
Thank you. Thank you, Manager Peterson.
Mr. President,
Manager Cook?
not to belabor this, but I would highly recommend that every first place you start as a member of the CAC is read the statute. I mean, the statute tells you what your roles and responsibilities are, and I believe, and if my recollection is correct, you're basically the eyes and ears and the points of contact for members of your community, and to bring things to our attention, to comment on actions that we've taken or contemplate taking. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a couple of additional slides on the actual process, Liz. So we worked on the process. So we got some input from individuals, and we tried to set out in a flow chart, which I think the Board of Managers have already received, and we've been able to look at, but it's something that again was in process from prior individuals and prior work, and we tried to set that out and make sure that we have the new and improved draft for the communication process is the one I suppose we should just kind of focus on. And you have that in front of you. It's basically that we identify an identification is made of key issues and concerns, supporter identity, and that's sent to the CAC. We put it up to a motion. If there's more information that's not required, we ask staff for that information. Again, we're looking at our position. Our position is not to require staff like some other governmental agencies where they can just direct staff to do things. So I believe our process is to ask you to ask staff and basically ask you for the information, and then you can mandate whether staff provides it to us or not based upon whether or not you feel we should get it. The motion is recorded into the minutes, and the draft CAC minutes are then sent to the officers and liaison with staff, and staff meets with us, and we make sure that we work with them and making sure that the minutes are presentable fashion and they're forwarded to the board.
Mr. President, I don't want to interrupt Mr. Aller, but
Manager
if I
Cook?
may. I had the issue that I think should be addressed, and this has been brought up before, but the part during the board meeting, we had feedback some time ago about, I think to the effect that you make motions, et cetera, and nothing happens to them. They vanish into the sky or ether or whatever you want to call it. And I think we're having a discussion at the governance committee meeting, and to bring up to the managers, I think that we managers should be required to take some action every time we get something from the CAC, whether that be reject it, forget it, table it until forever, or not, refer it for discussion or put it on the agenda for another meeting, or request staff to get back to us. But I think the process should, we should require ourselves as managers to act on every single motion that you make in some fashion, so that you have some immediate feedback. Because I think it's all too often, whether it's motions by you or other things that we discuss at our meetings, that I hope we can come up with a process that they don't fall through the cracks, that they are put on the list and they are affirmatively dealt with one way or the other. Like I said, whether it's rejection, forget it, tabling it indefinitely, tabling it to another meeting, staff can point, but I think that should be a key part on our part as managers. And I think that just shows respect for the work that you do, for us to take definitive action on your requests and recommendations. I'm finished. Thank you.
Great, thank you for those comments. So can we scroll down and make sure that we got the rest of there we go. So then after the CAC meeting, we covered that. And then of course, during a board meeting, so the officer of the CAC spokesperson will present the motion to the board and seek discussion with the managers during the CAC agenda item, which goes to what Manager Cook was just speaking regarding. And then the managers provide feedback and direct staff CAC as appropriate. So the draft minutes are then sent as part of the board packet for the next Board of Managers meeting, and we receive those. So again, that's where I think that the fact that we have electronic assets that are available to us and access to the website information, then we can get in and receive some notices when something is presented on the website, when actions are taken, and then that gives us, at our leisure or as soon as possible, an individual, if they're so inclined, can then look at that information and start reviewing the documentation or get a hold of other members to discuss their feelings. And of course, we understand that the board may or may not act on anything depending upon, or can table an item or reject an item ultimately. So we again look at our duties and our service to you as a situation where we want to put ourselves in a position to make your jobs easier.
Staff, Jeffrey.
President Ziegler.
So can you make a note to invite the
Absolutely.
chair or the vice chair to the next session for setting the draft agenda? And then
Absolutely.
just as a matter of course, that draft agenda gets reviewed by the managers in the board packet, and recommendations and changes get agreed to, and the final agenda is not set until the start of the board meeting.
Will do.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there anything else, or can we break for?
No, I think we shall release you to eat. We have the power to-
Mr.
We
President,
appreciate your time. Yes, Commissioner, Manager.
Mr. President, if I can,
Manager Cook?
I just want to thank Mr. Holler for taking the time to show up and for the committee to put the effort into looking at the process and wanting to improve it. And I am very much in favor of doing what we can do to improve that process, because I value the CAC's input and like to encourage that input. And finally, as I said before, I encourage the CAC members to, since we do it by Zoom, to listen into the meetings to the fullest extent that they can. And I think that will speed up your meetings and make them more productive. I was on the CAC for a number of years, and I kind of found the rehashing the meeting to be somewhat of a waste of time. I generally attended every meeting of the managers simply because I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, as they say. And I'd also say that there's a benefit to listening to the audio and the video because it's just not possible for minutes to capture everything, especially on items of interest. So that's all that I have. Again, I thank you.
And Mr. President,
Yes,
I would just like to also would be remiss if I didn't say, thank you to your manager, administrator, as well as your staff, because they really keep us moving along. They contact me, Liz will get a hold of me and get me going, and Terry will join in, and we'll make sure that we have an agenda that's appropriate. We'll make sure the minutes are out, and they really are the glue that holds the CAC together. So I thank them for all their efforts.
good. Do we have a motion to adjourn the workshop?
So moved.
A second.
So we need to do a roll call vote.
All right.
Terry, can you
Yep.
lead us through that?
Yep. Motion to adjourn. Manager Crafton,
Yes.
Manager Cook,
Yes.
Manager Pedersen,
Yes.
President Ziegler.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. See y'all in a half hour.
See ya.
Thank
Thanks everyone
you.
for your time.
Thanks, everyone. We'll
Thank
use the
you.
same Zoom link. Thank you.